Shri Rama Rama Ramiti Rame Rame Manorame Sahasranama Tutulyam Rama Nama Varanane. We delight in the beautiful name of Shri Ram. We can repeat again and again, for even if we remember this name and personality just once, the very name of Shri Ram bestows the fruit that is equal to 1,000 names of the all-pervading one Lord Vishnu. So we are continuing our story of Rama, and just to recapture a few details, we can see from last time, and last time, of course, I was a recorded one, so I hope you managed to follow the recording. So we just remember how Ravana, the last incident really, has humbled him greatly. And he's humbled, and this great king, for the first time, his pride is gone, just temporarily, no doubt. And he is crestfallen and is ashamed. And he's the Lord of Lanka, but he doesn't feel like that at all. And he goes back to the palace. Just as when we ourselves are humbled, as it were, unwillingly, when our pride gets in the way of acknowledging our own inadequacies, our own weaknesses, then, of course, the very stance that we have sometimes crumbles. The physical stance that we have sometimes crumbles, and we look and feel crestfallen. So it was the first time that he met a reverse in his whole life. Everything had been going his way. And now the result of that is one becomes reflective. In normal circumstances, that's what happens. And the thought of his wicked deeds start to prick his conscience. But still, it doesn't last very long. He wants to make one more desperate struggle to vanquish the monkey forces that are marshaled by man, a mere insignificant entity from his previous point of view, both being insignificant creatures, monkeys and humans alike. He's fought with the deities and very powerful beings and so on, but monkeys and man, Now, the interesting thing is, many people make a misinterpretation of modern evolutionary theory and say that we come from apes. Of course, this is no evolutionist will ever say this, but there are some people bent on destroying the theory of evolution in its broadest context and saying, well, we still find apes going on, we still find gorillas in the Congo or Zaire, we still find chimpanzees all around. And so none of them seem to evolve into man and so on. But it's a misunderstanding. And don't forget, Darwin didn't mention so much this term evolution. He was keen to indicate that there seemed to be a common origin. And that even if you go further back, you say, well, we came from bacteria. Now, if you go back and avoid the mystery of how inorganic material can become organic, or that sentient, apparently non-sentient minerals can become organic cells, then you trace yourself way back. And what philosophy does is it traces ourselves way, way back to the ultimate origin. The Vedanta calls this Brahman. Anyway, you see, still the metal of which Ravana is made is too thick to be agitated. So he still has this inner strength. This is what makes him a powerful king. It's a good quality, no doubt, directed in the right way. And so he's too thick to be agitated for very long over just a small temporary trifling reverse in life. And so he restores his equilibrium again, as we all must, and he summons a few of the stewards. And he is now, having exhausted much of his resources, he is now resorting to Kumbhkarana. And that's where we pick up the story. So, as a result of a curse, Kumbhkarana used to sleep for months and months together. And he had gone to sleep just a few days before the events that we have just related, all the preceding events. Now, of course, those who are bent on philosophy can easily see that while Ravana represents selfishness, egocentricity, rajas, that kind of thing, we find that Kumbhkarana will represent what we call tamas, that is inertia, laziness. We require it, of course, otherwise we'd never have any sleep. All of the elements we require. But when they're exaggerated, then it's very difficult. So we are all cursed, possibly, if you can take it that way, with the temptation to sleep for long periods of time, either in order to recoup from a stressful event in our life, or just because it seems more pleasant. And so Ravana asks his ministers to spare no efforts to rouse Kumbhkarana at once and get him ready for battle. Now we can also take it in a yogic way, that in order for us to reach the highest potential that we have to rouse the slumbering, the yogic language for it is the slumbering serpent, or the slumbering coiled up potential that we have, the kundali, the one which is coiled up, kundalini. Now, Ravana comes to a conclusion. He comes to the conclusion that all his penances, all his tapasya, all his discipline that has made him so strong have actually proved to be futile. It looks as though the prophecy of the rishis will be fulfilled, namely that his destruction will be imminent. And so Ravana says to himself that maybe this is it, maybe there's some doubt going on there. But rooted in his determination to fight to the last, he issues the orders as if he were certain of ultimate success. Naturally, if we want any result, whether it's good or ill, we have to have this great determination. And as I mentioned many times, three processes or strata of processes are necessary for any successful endeavor. And one is to have a great desire for what you want, and a great determination to get it, and a dedication. That means eat it, drink it, sleep it, have a magnificent obsession about it. Same thing with spiritual realization. And so he determines, let the warriors guard the fortress on all sides. My brother Kumbhkarana is sound asleep, and he sleeps blissfully unaware of my anxiety. He won't wake up for months together if left alone. It's only 9 days since he started sleeping. So here's my command, rouse him at once. And if he wakes up and goes to the battle, then the enemy will surely be scattered. Who can stand before my Kumbhkarana? If he wakes up and opposes my enemies in battle, then I will have no fear. I'm sure that everything will be sorted out correctly. And so Ravana's officers and their servants, accordingly, they go off to Kumbhkarana's palace, and they know that as soon as he opens his eyes, he will be rapaciously hungry. That goes without saying. Somebody wakes you up, you'll feel hungry. So they first prepare and pile up mountains of food for him, and then they make a great din, beating drums and blowing conches. And Many Rakshasas exhausted themselves, pushing and shaking the huge body of the Rakshasa. And the noise that they made up with their shouts and drums and trumpets, they fill the sky and frighten all birds and beasts of the whole of the land of Lanka. But Kumbhkarana, in his sleep, hears nothing. The Rakshasas work hard at rousing him, and they also bring in elephants and make the elephants walk on his body. They take cudgels and belabor him with these things. And at last, after a while, his eyelids open slightly, as one might, brush away a mosquito while still asleep. And he pushes them all aside and yawns. The beautiful, graphic, poetic scene that Valmiki is describing. And Kumbhkarana, who is thus disturbed in his sleep, which of course would otherwise have been months and months long, but before he could find out the cause of this disturbance, he begins to eat and drink straight away. This is also part of tamas. Not only is there laziness, but overindulgence in eating and drinking. And the heaps of meat and the pots of blood and wine they keep ready for him were all finished. And when his hunger is somewhat mitigated, then the Rakshasas approach him to acquaint him with the situation. Ravana's ministers, Upaksha, say, "My lord," or his minister, he says, "My lord, we have been defeated in battle and we stand in grave danger. And you remember the quarrel with Sita, about Sita, you remember all that before you fell asleep. The Vanaras with Rama and Lakshmana, they've arrived. They're breaking through into the fort. And they have slaughtered and defeated our whole army almost, which never knew defeat before. Lanka is surrounded by the Vanara host as by an ocean. And Ravana himself, he went to battle, but then he had to retreat. He retired from the field, having had his worst of it. And it was our good luck that he escaped with his very life." Now, hearing this, Kumbhkarana was beside himself with rage. So anger is also a characteristic. So laziness, greed, anger, all followed one by one. "This very instant I shall go and destroy this enemy. I shall kill the Vanaras and drink the blood of Rama and Lakshmana," he says. "And after finishing this first, I shall go and wait on the king." And the ministers were beside themselves with joy. They were delighted to hear this furious speech, but they also pleaded with Kumbhkarana that he should first see the king, not the other way around, and take advice with him, take counsel with him as to exactly what should be done, what is the strategy. And Kumbhkarana agrees. So he washes his face and then strides in somber majesty, his big bulky body walks into the hall of the king of Lanka. And the Rakshasas who are standing there on the royal highway, they feel new courage and joy as they see him pass, and they bow low before him and shower flowers on him, like a hero already defeating the enemy. And he enters the palace and stands in the presence of Ravana, rejoicing at the arrival of his peer, his peerless, his unrivaled brother. Ravana steps down from his throne and embraces him. "What can I do for you, brother?" Kumbhkarana actually asks. "Why did you get me? Why did you break my sleep? And what makes you afraid? This must be a severe emergency. Tell me, who is tired of life and wants to be turned into a corpse?" It's a question, not a statement. So, who is it who is tired of life? And who is it who wants to be turned into a corpse? You let me know and I'll oblige. "Oh, brother, you don't know what has happened," says Ravana to him. "You are lost in sleep. The man Rama has become a real menace to me. He's built a dam across the sea, a big bridge, and we considered it inviolate, and now the Vanara army surrounds Lanka like another sea. You see, you're in a country which is surrounded by a natural defense called the sea. It's an island. And somebody has built a bridge across. And so the first defense was breached. And so our warriors who sorted out and met them, they have been defeated and almost annihilated completely. And it's for you now to save us from destruction. And I know you can do it. You've put the gods to rout, all the deities in heaven, and I know your love for me. I know your keenness and your courage in battle. So go at once and annihilate these enemies and help us in our need and save Lanka. And so Kumbhkarana, when he hears Ravana's words of anxiety, he's moved at first to fury against the enemy, but soon he remembers the whole story and Ravana's vainglorious confidence in his invincibility. And that made him smile a little bitterly. And he says, well, excuse me, my brother, the warning we gave you when you consulted us, you went unheeded. Just have to remind you of that. Our fears have come true. You rejected the good advice we gave you. Now you're suffering the consequences of your error and your sin. And Kumbhkarana is saying this. You brought away Sita. What else can happen when driven by lust? One acts without thinking. If you so desired and you had the confidence and strength, it would have been wise first to have slain Rama and Lakshmana and then seized her. That's the normal way. Defeat them first and then take the fruits of your conquest. This is the way people thought, of course, in the ancient days, and also today, unfortunately, to a great extent. So you've done these things without due thought and in the wrong order. And when anybody acts without seeking or regarding the advice of the wise and the faithful friends and kinspeople, it's no wonder that a person can run into danger and ruin. So didn't you know that these things must follow? Should not a king understand who gives him good advice and who gives him bad advice and weigh the options out and make the correct course of action? And Ravana didn't like all this lecturing, of course, but did he have any choice? He had no use now for the lessons of the past or in ethics or politics or any of these things. Right now, he was faced with a difficulty, and so his face flushed with anger. But of course, he controlled himself because he needs Kumbhkarana. And he says, brother, the time is now past for all these talks and lectures of what should be done, what shouldn't be done. What I really need right now isn't your criticism, but I need your power. What is done has been done, and it's useless discussing whether it was correct or incorrect, just or unjust, whatever the case be, wise or unwise. We've gone way past that now. The question now is what we should do in our present predicament. It's your duty now to use your strength and skill and ward off the present disasters resulting from past errors. He is a true friend and a true kinsman who helps one out of the trouble that has been brought on oneself. Maybe because of folly or something like that, but if indeed you care for me, then the time is now to show it by helping me instead of commenting on my conduct. I depend on your strength and prowess. Out of your infinite courage, give me comfort. And Kumbhkarana is moved emotionally by this appeal, and he assures him, have no more worry about this. I am your brother, and I can never forsake you. So rest assured that Rama and Lakshmana are already dead. I shall scatter and slay their monkey army, I shall fling at your feet the head of Rama, and you shall see the Vanara king's blood flowing on the battlefield. What a wonderful, gory idea. Rama can only approach you. If he does, over my dead body, and that is not possible, for no one can vanquish or slay me. Now, one of the reasons why Kumbhkarana sleeps for such a long time is in order to preserve his power a little bit. And also, of course, Kumbhkarana is a Rakshasa. His pride swells. No matter who the enemy is, he cries out, I shall destroy him. Be he Yama or Surya or Agni or any of the deities, I shall eat them all up. And in this mood, he rushes out to the field of battle. Now, the sudden awakening from deep slumber has completely upset his temper. But when his consuming hunger and thirst had been appeased, he had recovered his balance and spoke wisdom to Ravana. But again, seeing Ravana's plight, his fraternal affection and his pity made him forget everything else. And he goes forth. And Ravana, of course, is very pleased at this development. Oh, my true warrior, oh, my brother, what a friend indeed I have in Kumbhkarana. And he exclaims this with a great deal of confidence that Kumbhkarana would return triumphant. And he now felt like one recovering from some kind of mortal sickness. He's recovered. His humiliation is now forgotten. And Kumbhkarana arms himself with his great spear, and he was about to go and do battle alone. But Ravana stopped him and sent an army to aid him. Now you may wonder, how many armies did Ravana have? When we say armies, we mean divisions of one army. And so he's sending this reserve off with Kumbhkarana. And he covers his brother's big body with jewels and garments and blesses him, saying, Go, my hero, I'm paying you in advance. Destroy the enemies and return victorious. And tall and mighty limbed Kumbhkarana, covered with shining jewels, was radiant like Trivikrama himself. And he circumambulates his brother, bows and marches out with his spear in his hand at the head of a great army, amidst all the plaudits of the Rakshasas, and under a shower of flowers and good wishes. And as the huge form of Kumbhkarana, a giant even among the Rakshasas, was seen stepping across the fortress wall like Yam at the end of time, or some great natural cataclysm, the Vanaras are frightened. They start running in all directions, and you can see their own monkey nature. With great difficulty, their chiefs rally them and put them in battle formation. And it is the same thing in the human psyche when we are faced with some kind of danger, and the danger seems to catch us by the surprise. And when we try to rally our forces, well, the danger itself sometimes gives the effect of scattering our mind, scattering our reasoning. It's very easy for fear to take hold of us. And when we do that, our whole mental faculty becomes scattered. And it becomes difficult to rally things round into cohesive formation again. Now, rallied by Angada, the Vanaras, they recover their courage. They come in, their scatteredness goes, and they become one-pointed again in psychology terms. And they reform in battle order and prepare to receive Kumbhkarana. They hurl rocks at him and deal heavy blows with trees plucked by the roots, but he discards them all with a smile on his face, a confident smile. These things are nothing to him. And he goes on dispatching the Vanaras with methodical cruelty that was most terrifying. And some of these Vanaras retreated to the newly built causeway, while others tried to save themselves by concealing on the shore of the sea in the forests, hiding. But once again, Angada has to encourage the Vanara chiefs and warriors and get them reformed. And then they start attacking Kumbhkarna more systematically. Dvida, Hanuman, Nila, Rishabha, Sarabha, and other chiefs, they start attacking Kumbhkarna fiercely. But he disregards them all and continues his ruthless slaughter of the Vanaras. Angada himself receives a blow, as a result of which he faints and falls on the earth. And Sugriva also was struck down. And picking up the unconscious Vanara king, Kumbhkarna carries him with joy towards Lanka. And the Rakshasa army rejoices and raises a triumphant uproar. And Kumbhkarna wished to make a present of the captive Vanara, the king of the Vanaras, to his brother Ravana as a demonstration. Look, it's nothing. And look, here's that king. And Kumbhkarna goes through the royal highway carrying in triumph the unconscious Vanara king. And the Rakshasas and their women folk standing on the terraces, they shower flowers and pour sandal paste. And this incidentally revives Sugriva. It has that effect, and he opens his eyes and wonders where he is and what has happened, and he soon understands everything. And then he begins to bite with his teeth and tear with his nails and ears and the ears and nose of the Rakshasa who is carrying him. And worried thus, Kumbhkarna throws him down, intending to crush him with his feet. But when he was once on the ground, Sugriva jumps up and flies off across the sky and arrives at the place where Rama is. And Hanuman was sure that Sugriva would somehow come back. Foreseeing this escape of Sugriva, Hanuman calls or rallies the Vanara ranks and prepares them again once more for battle. And grim and gruesome, with torn nose and ears, Kumbhkarna, like a great blood-red evening cloud and raging like death at the end of time, returns to the battlefield with a huge iron mace now in his hand. How quickly we rejoice about some things. Some things we feel are victorious, but they pass and they're fleeting and we have to start again, particularly things which are unethical. Now, no one could now stop Kumbhkarna. He begins to kill and devour the Vanaras, and the whole army begins to disappear in this very way. And they try to deter him by climbing on his mountain-like body and tearing at him with nails and teeth, but it has not much effect, for he just shakes them off as if they were just flies. And none of the Vanara chiefs could hold him. And Lakshmana himself, he tries with his arrows to obstruct his progress, but the Rakshasa passes him by and rushes forward. He wants to face Rama himself. And for a long time, Rama keeps aiming powerful darts at the Rakshasa. The arrow that pierces the 7 saltries and the adamantine body of Vali was powerless, actually, against Kumbhkarna. And sending sharper and stronger arrows, Rama wounds the arms and the feet of the Rakshasa, but nothing short of death would stop him. His legs were cut off, but legless he moved about on his stumps and went on with demoniac ferocity, fighting his brother's battle. Even in the midst of a crisis, in the midst of difficulties, if we don't have the right strategy in dealing with them, you can see that this cutting off of the legs, this incapacitation that should be there is not there, and we still don't learn and we still carry on with our determined efforts. And at last, Rama cuts off Kumbhkarna's head with an arrow. And the severed head, carried by the force of Rama's arrow, rises up into the sky, and red with blood falls in Lanka like a hill with its forest aflame. and the news was carried now to Ravana. What news? Well, your brother Kumbhkarana, terrible like all-destroying death at the end of time, has now entered into the heaven of slaughtered heroes. He killed thousands of Vanas, and for a long time he kept the army of Rama and Lakshmana in fear of destruction. But at last, alas, he was slain by Rama himself, and he was deprived of his arms, of his legs, and finally his head. His mutilated body lies like a mighty tree disfigured by a forest fire. And a part has fallen into the sea, actually. Another big part blocks the entrance to the fortress, and the severed head, flying across the sky, has dropped in the very city and is lying right there. Your beloved brother is gone. Now, when the Rakshasas told this tale to Ravana, Ravana felt his own life had left him, and he fainted. You see, his last choice, his very brother. Anyway, after recovering consciousness, he cries in grief and anger, "Ah, mighty warrior, how could you go to Yama's world, leaving me behind? My right hand is cut off. How did Rama kill you? You who, in the whole world, no enemy dared to approach." And you can see the gods, the deities in the whole universe rejoicing in their heavens at your fall. The Vanara, they are dancing with delight. Of what use is this very kingdom to me now? Why should I cling to life when my dear brother has left me? Yes, I have to torture and slay the man who killed this dear brother of mine. And then with sudden and futile remorse, he wails, "Alas, why did I refuse to listen to Vibhishana?" Trisiras and his other sons tried to console Ravana. What's the use of lamenting, they say. You have secured from Brahma the strength and armor. Why should you fear or lose yourself in grief? And Trisiras himself sets out for the battlefield, and many others eagerly follow him, riding on elephants and chariots. And now a great battle ensues. Nalantaka, riding on horseback, spear in hand, he wreaks havoc among the Vanaras, and he is proceeding towards Sugriva, and Angada opposes him and kills him and his horse also. And in the same way, Devantaka and Trisiras were slain by Hanuman, and Mahodara by Nila, and Atikaya fell a prey to Lakshmana's arrows. But before they die, these four brave soldiers had fought like four Yamas and caused enormous loss to the Varna forces. But when Ravana heard that Atikaya was dead, he was confused. That's incredible. These, my warriors, they are firm and mighty like mountains and irresistible like the ocean. And they've all been slain one by these enemies. Those who till now have never known defeat have been defeated, and they lie down dead in the battlefield. There stand my enemies who have broken out of the serpent entanglements with which my peerless son Indrajit had bound them. I can't explain the marvel of this man Rama's strength. May it be that he is Narayana himself starts to understand this. Narayana, that is the source of all beings, whose evolutionary height is man himself. Made in the image and likeness of God, says the Bible. And so bewildered, Ravana loses his courage, loses his heart. And he wants the enemy forces should definitely not enter fully the fortress, and in particular, should not enter the Ashoka Vana where Sita is. So he supervises the defenses again and returns to the palace, downcast and forlorn. At this point, anybody would give up, surrender, or return Sita. But you see, wickedness is stubborn. And Indrajit comforts his father. Why should you worry when I am here still alive? And he says, and gathers an army, another division, and with it makes another sortie, another attack. He swoops down on the Vanara forces and kills and wounds thousands of them, and they were helpless against his fury. The Brahmastra of Indrajit was effective against even Rama and Lakshmana, who were tied up by it. They lay unconscious on the ground, and the Rakshasa prince went straight to his anxious father with the glad news of this achievement. Now you see throughout religious history, it's described the forces of good and the forces of evil, as it were, battling each other. In Christianity, for example, there's the adversary Satan, with the legend has it that it is a fallen angel, same thing in Islam. But you see, do we really need an anti-God in philosophy? And the answer is no. We have to take this also, not just as a historical account, with a beautiful story around it, an imaginative, creative story around it, but it also illustrates the practical philosophy of spirituality. What should we do when tied up, as it were, by the forces of evil? They're not coming from outside. They're coming from inside. And the battle is internal, as it were. And so, there is again opportunity to bring the glad news. Don't forget Indrajit's speciality. First of all, there was the serpent rope, as it were, that bound Rama and Lakshmana and spellbound them also. And now something else is coming out similar to this. Anyway, Vibhishana, who understands the Rakshasas and their tactics, he rallies the Vanara leaders who had scattered in all directions, and they puts hope and courage into them. In difficult circumstances, we should gather our confused mental forces together, all the senses that are liable to go in different directions, and make the scattered mind one-pointed. So Jambavan, who was more dead than alive now, moves slowly among the Vanaras, inquiring, is Hanuman still alive? And Hanuman replies, yes, I'm here. And he bows low before this old general, Jambavan. My son, says the old Vanara, proceed northwards. Do it at once and cross the sea to the Himalaya range. Between the Rishabha and Kailasha peaks, there is the hill of herbs. And in that hilltop, there are 4 medicinal plants that you need to get. And if you bring them here quickly, Rama and Lakshmana and the Vanara army will recover consciousness. Now it's remarkable, Valmiki is repeating the story, and we see geographically, he's in Lanka there. See, the story is there in Lanka, modern day Sri Lanka. And then he's aware of Mount Kailash on the other side. What a geographic range Valmiki has in relating the story. Not only that, but we can also identify the various places from the Ayodhya down to Lanka. And now north of that, even beyond that range. So all the wounds, if you bring these herbs, all the wounds will be healed and they will fight again. Do this without loss of time. And only you can do this, because only you have the capacity to fly there in this way, and you're also not wounded. So accordingly, Hanuman springs up into the air and moves fast. And he reaches the hill that's described by the Venerable Jambavan. And as he couldn't identify which plant is what, and there's an urgency to this, he carries the whole hill and returns with it to Lanka. And even with the approach of the Sanjeevi hill, Rama and Lakshmana and the Vanaras, they feel the darts slip off their bodies, and their wounds are healed, and they become strong, and they stand up. Now, the significance to us is, you see, we have this expression, I will move heaven and hell, or I'll remove mountains for you. You can see the love of Hanuman. He takes this whole mountain, not just take the whole hill, not just the 4 plants, takes the whole thing uncompromisingly. And this is the remedy for us. When we are suffering from wounds, physical, mental, cultural, in all the various divisions and elements of our life, what is the remedy? There will always be a solution somewhere, a creative solution in this case. And wounds can be healed because with the sacredness, as it were, of the hill. The hill wasn't taken from anywhere else except the very sacred Himalayas. And so the battle resumes. And taking counsel with Rama, Sugriva now chooses a few Vanaras and orders them to enter Lanka and set fire to the city, to enter into the heart of the fortress and get into the city. And towards midnight, they enter the city with torches. And they attack and overpower the sentry and set fire to the palace and turrets of Lanka, and houses in their thousands are reduced to ashes. Valmiki describes this particular incident in great detail. And it reads very much like the destruction of cities in modern battles that we see in Egypt, the modern example of the destruction of cities in Ukraine, for example. And these are now familiar to us. Fire is the very element, the very destructive element that goes through. The last century, you can imagine the Blitz in London, and London literally burning from these attacks. And seeing Lanka being burnt down by the Vanaras, Ravana was furious, and he sends the battlefield Kumbha and Nikumbha, sons of Kumbhkarana, and they have a personal vendetta now. Their father was killed. Now, you may ask, because I previously mentioned it, is it not unethical to go in and fight at night? But I also mentioned the Rakshasas had no respect for that, for the chivalry of the day. And so, you matching one person's behavior with another in the circumstance. So Kumbha and Nikumbha are the sons of Kumbhakarna, and together with Upaksha and other Rakshasas or other Rakshasa warriors, they enter into the fray. And after another terrible battle, Kumbha is slain by Sugriva and Nikumbha by Hanuman. And Makaraksha, son of Kara, was who opposed Rama. He falls to his fiery arrows, the fiery arrows of Rama, and many more mighty Rakshasas perish. Then at the bidding of Ravana, Indrajit goes once again to the battle, and he rises into the sky and becomes invisible. Our enemies are invisible. Greed, pride, anger, lust, all of these are invisible to us and creep us up. And if we're not cautious and if we're not alert, we'll be overwhelmed by these, by an internal script that goes on. And thus, he fought against unseen by the Vanaras. Indrajit, by his necromancy, created a Maya Sita, and putting her in a chariot, he takes her before the Vanara army and seemingly kills her in their presence. Again, the use of magic. And deceived and horrified by this, the Vanaras start asking themselves, well, what good is it now to continue this war? And they leave the field, so convinced are they, and go to Rama with the heartrending news. Now, as a result of this trick, Indrajit gains time to perform an Asuric sacrifice. The Asuras are supposed to be the demons, but originally in the Vedas, or the ancient Vedas, Asura simply meant a deity. And we see the antiquity of this because the whole of the subcontinent and Iran, particularly eastern Iran, are the same country. And there we have, in the Zoroastrian religion, we have this term of Ahura. Ahura Mazda is the supreme deity. And Ahura is a corruption of Ashura. And so the original term is meant. But as time goes on, the term Ashura now means that aspect that is no longer a revealing factor. Deva is a revealing factor, illuminating factor. Ashura is the opposite of it, and yet powerful, of course, delineating two different kinds of forces. And so naturally, you cannot mobilize the forces of good. You have to mobilize the forces of evil. And so Rama and Lakshmana, like the Vanara warriors, actually believe that Sita is dead, and they, of course, are lost in grief. Now you see it's the same thing the other way around. When Sita was shown the bodies of Rama and Lakshmana, all a magical illusion. And our grief also comes about because of what we can see as Maya, a kind of illusion in life that makes us take life more seriously than it is. Takes it to be real. And no doubt it is real in a relative way, but we have to penetrate this veil of illusion and see what is the truth behind it. Once we do that, all our grief goes, says the Upanishads. And so we can see that completely bewildered, helpless, and Vibhishana comes and inquires what happened here. And he listens to their story, but then he says, you have been deceived. See, Rakshasas, no Rakshasas. Never would Ravana allow Sita to be killed, ever. Because the whole thing is catching this prize and holding on to her. This is only a trick of sorcery. Indrajit tries to defeat you through magic. Having given up all hope of achieving success by normal means, he's gone to perform an Asuric sacrifice of great power, and if he completes it, then we cannot vanquish him. So we should interrupt it. We should therefore go and obstruct the sacrifice, and let Lakshmana go at once and mar Indrajit's purpose. How do things materialize? It's not because of good or bad. It's because of the power of thought. And thought is no respecter of ethics and morals, unless we direct it deliberately and consciously toward a higher purpose, a more noble goal. And so, if he completes it, we cannot vanquish him, that's for sure, and we should go and obstruct it. And so let Lakshmana go is the suggestion, and mar Indrajit's purpose, and let's do it immediately. So accepting this advice, Rama sends Lakshmana, and accompanying him is Hanuman and other Vanaras, and besides also Vibhishana. And they go off to the spot where Indrajit is about to offer oblations to evil spirits, that means to the darker forces of nature. And the sacrifice is interrupted, and a long and fierce battle also ensues. And ascending his chariot, the son of Ravana sends forth his arrows. standing on Hanuman, Lakshmana does the same. And as they were well matched in strength and skill, the battle lasts a long time. Indrajit's chariot gets destroyed in the course of the combat, and both the heroes stand on the ground and continue the battle. Now at last, Lakshmana uses the Indra Ashtra spell. How will you combat the magic of wrong thinking? You do it with the magic of right thinking. These are called weapons. And they're accompanied by great powerful names, if you like, called mantras. So this Indra Ashtra spell and uttering the name of Rama, there's the mantra, discharges the fatal arrow, and the head of Indrajit gets severed and falls to the ground. And as it falls, it shines like fire. The Devas and the Gandharvas showered flowers from the heavens. Why? Because there's courage, there are qualities of courage, fortitude, and power. And Lakshmana then, and they are showering flowers from the heavens, not because of that alone, but the glory of the defeat, in other words, the glory of the heroes. In other words, righteousness is coming to the fore, and as we know, Satyameva Jayati, truth alone, ultimately triumphs. And now Lakshmana, he goes to Rama, and in the process, of course, of the battle, Lakshmana is wounded all over and is also bleeding. And he walks slowly in pain, and supported by Jambavan and Hanuman, Rama has already heard the news, of course, of the death of Indrajit. Lakshmana, he cries out, this is the end of the Rakshasa race. You have achieved it. And Lakshmana modestly stands back, but Rama seated him on his very lap and kisses his head and gives vent to his joy. See, you have performed a mighty deed, impossible for anyone else, and even the deities and Gandharvas are celebrating. You have deprived Ravana of his right hand. Who in the world can equal you? Or even Vibhishana or Hanuman? I've no more care. You have vanquished the conqueror of Indra. Indrajit, conqueror of Indra. I feel I have already recovered Sita. Anyway, of course, the news of Indrajit's demise reaches Ravana, that Indrajit has been slain by Lakshmana. And when he hears that, Vibhishana helped Lakshmana in slaying Indrajit. His grief and anger swell, and the tears he sheds burnt where they fell, and from his mouth issues fire. Alas, my son, O peerless warrior, O hero, vanquisher of the great Indra, has death won after all? Have you entered the heaven of heroes? But I shall not grieve, he resolves. But of course the father's heart will not thus be denied, and again he cries, what? Is Indrajit gone? The world is now empty for me. O son, you have left your mother, Mandodari, and your dear wife, and myself, heartbroken and disconsolate. Nothing remains to us now but revenge and despair. Imagine, revenge and despair is ultimate the action. This is what makes him a Rakshasa. Otherwise, we could have great compassion also for all of these characters in the story and the story of life. But there are no bad people. There are bad behaviors, and bad behaviors have to change in ourselves and others, of course. So he resolves now the last final solution is to kill Sita. And he thinks it's best to kill her, the cause of all this tragedy, not understanding he is the cause of the tragedy, not Sita. And often we blame somebody else or something else for these misfortunes instead of honing in on the correct analysis of what is the cause of all our problems. The cause of all our problems, inevitably, more than likely, is ourselves. And so, having said this, he rushes out, sword in hand, and he intends to go and do this. And some fierce Rakshasas, seeing Ravana issuing out in anger, they applaud him with joy. That's what they wanted to do in the first place. But the minister Suparshva was horrified, and he appeals to Ravana's better sense, what was due to himself as a man and a king. That remind you of your dignity. You were about to attack and do away with a woman, a defenseless person. King, he cries, how dare you think such a thought? How can you do it? A lord of 10 heads, brother of Kumbhkarana, are you thinking to kill a woman? Are you going to incur this shame and sin? Can you thus be tempted by anger? You have mastered the Vedas and all the sciences. You have performed many penances. How can you end up with such a thing as this? And just in case you're confused, mastering the Vedas and all the sciences contained within them do not guarantee spirituality. It is purely on the level of intellect and materialism. And thus, we don't take the karma kanda as the finality of wisdom. We take the jnana kanda, the knowledge portion of the Vedas. By the way, the karma kanda, that portion of the Vedas, is also, according to some, coded scientific, written in coded scientific language. And not just hymns of praises and rituals and so on that comes out in the Brahmanas and the Aranyakas, but also a book of science. And therefore, Hindus take the Vedas as true in all their aspects. Anyway, having said this, he says, you're better than this. Who is equal to you? Let's direct our anger against Rama. It will be a new moon tomorrow. Gather all your armies and issue out of Lanka and finally slay Rama and Lakshmana and have done with it and achieve your victory. And then take Sita, put on the armor you have secured from Brahma himself, and ascend your chariot and go to battle. And Ravana feels that Suparshva was right and his words were good. And so, seated on his throne, he was silent for a while, lost in profound meditation. And then he addresses the commanders with folded hands and saying, go now with all your strength and slay Ram. And if even you fail, I shall go myself and destroy him. He's also not sending others at this point. Never before had he been so courteous and humble when dealing with his officers. And adversity has taught him this particular lesson. Mounted on chariots that shone like the hills on the evening horizon, and on the back of great elephants and beautiful horses, Ravana's personal army goes out in full force for the great battle. And the Vanaras, they tear up rocks and trees and attack the Rakshasas fiercely, and the Rakshasas return attack with equally grim ferocity. And the Vanaras jump about everywhere, and they work havoc amongst the Rakshasas, their chariots and animals. Each of the Rakshasas was surrounded by many Vanaras and slain. Now the whole episode reminds me of African scenes. Baboons, which are part of the ape species, baboons go around in well-organized groups, and they have extreme sharp teeth, and they're extremely dangerous, and they surround you strategically, and they're capable of tearing you from limb to limb. So I can see the value of that kind of raw, unsophisticated arrangement. Now the Vanaras, they tear up the rocks and so on, and the Vanaras, they jump about everywhere, and they work havoc among the Rakshasas and their chariots and their animals. And each of the Rakshasas was surrounded by many, many Vanaras and slain. And the Rakshasas too, the Rakshasas didn't spare the Vanaras. They killed them in tens of thousands. Imagine. And Rama bends his bow and sends showers of arrows against the Rakshasas, who destroyed their army like a raging fire. And warriors only saw their companions fall, and they couldn't see Rama because of the shower of arrows that he was sending out. And their fear conjured up a multitude of Ramas who dealt death in all directions. And countless elephants and horses perished. Thousands of chariots were broken, and the Rakshasa army was destroyed, all but a handful who fled into Lanka. And when you see this, you cannot help but think this is a major historical battle. When you see the quantity of the forces and all the equipment that is being employed. And the Devas and the Gandharvas and the Sitas, different kinds of heavenly beings, they sing the praises of Rama from above. And in Lanka, the Rakshasa women cling to each other and lament loudly that Ravana's folly, his key mistake, should have brought this great calamity on them. What a pity. Now we'll end there because the final end of Ravana comes, and we'll continue that story next week. So we'll leave it there, and we'll start on the next chapter, which is, of course, going to be the finality of Ravana, but I don't want to spoil the conclusions of this battle. And so we leave it there. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. Peace, peace, peace be unto all. And I mean that literally and seriously, because look at the result of a lack of peace. And when we look at the causes, we find the peace is being disturbed unnecessarily, even today. Good, thanks.
Thank you, Swami.
Thank you, Swami.
Thank you, Swamiji.
Thank you, Swamiji.
Om